Hi, this is Jeff Curto. Welcome to episode number 72 of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. Well, a couple of notes first off. First, I would like to thank podcast listener Richard for his extremely generous donation to Camera Position via the PayPal donation button on the cameraposition.com website. Thank you, Richard, and donations like that go a long way to helping me make Camera Position a reality. Secondly, those of you who are considering signing up for the Tuscany workshop, we still have some spaces left, and we have a registration deadline of Friday, February 6th, 2009. So if you're interested in going on that workshop, get that registration form off of photographitaly.com and fill it out and send it in, and we'll look forward to seeing you in Tuscany May 16th through 23rd, 2009. Got a number of great photographers signed up already, and I'm really excited about the workshop. So, Camera Position number 72 is the fifth in a kind of discontinuous series of photographers' bookshelf items. A long time ago, a podcast listener suggested that I make a list of the books that I thought to be the most significant books a photographer should have on their bookshelf. And so I started out on that list, but because the list is rather variable, it's been a sort of a long process of sorting out what books I think are the critical books to have on your bookshelf. And this photographer's bookshelf number 5 selection is a new publication, a new book. Well, it's not really a new book, but it's a new version of a book that is 50 years old. It's Robert Frank's masterpiece, The Americans. And in 1955, Swiss photographer Robert Frank set out to photograph and observe the United States, and he was supported by a grant from the Guggenheim Foundation, and he traveled across the United States for 2 years, and the result was a project called The Americans, a visionary work and a milestone in the history of photography. He exposed 687 rolls of 35 millimeter film, over 20,000 images. He printed 1,000 proofs and eventually whittled that down to only 83 images for his book, The Americans. He befriended the Beat poets and convinced one of the great voices of that Beat generation, Jack Kerouac, to write an introduction to the book. So here is the voice of Jack Kerouac, or my voice standing in for Jack Kerouac's, from the intro to The Americans. That crazy feeling in America, when the sun is hot on the streets and music comes out of the jukebox or from a nearby funeral. That's what Robert Frank has captured in the tremendous photographs taken as he traveled on the road around practically 48 states in an old used car, and with the agility, mystery, genius, sadness, and strange secrecy of a shadow, photographed scenes that have never been seen before on film. Kerouac went on to say near the end of his introduction, Robert Frank, Swiss, unobtrusive, nice. With that little camera that he raises and snaps with one hand, he sucked a sad poem right out of America onto film, taking rank among the tragic poets of the world. Frank found an irony in the glossy veneer of American culture and prosperity, especially that prosperity that the United States enjoyed post-World War II in the mid-1950s. That ironic stance made in Frank's photograph is very different from most of the photojournalism that was being practiced at the time. The other thing that made Frank's pictures different was his unusual technique. Well, technique that was unusual at least for this time period. He used shallow depth of field, low available light, camera motion, overexposure, and strange tension-producing cropping as creative tools. And this just flew in the face of what most of the people in the world understood photography to be at the time, and it made this work really controversial. This combination of the ironic approach of the images and their unusual technique made it difficult for Frank to get a publisher interested in the work. It was first published in France by Robert Delpierre as Les Américains in 1958. Pardon my French pronunciation, any French listeners out there. Then, in 1959, Grove Press published The Americans in the United States, which initially received substantial criticism. One of my favorites was from Popular Photography magazine that said the images had, quote, meaningless blur, muddy exposures, drunken horizons, and general sloppiness. The book sold slowly at first, but Kerouac's introduction helped broaden the audience because of the reach of the beat phenomenon of that time. Frank himself said, "I have frequently been accused of deliberately twisting subject matter to my own point of view. Above all, I know that life for a photographer cannot be a matter of indifference. Opinion often consists of a kind of criticism, but criticism can come out of love. It's important to see what is invisible to others." To mark the 50th anniversary of the first publication of The Americans, a new edition was released worldwide on May 30th, 2008. Published by Gerhard Stiedel under Frank's very close scrutiny, Frank chose the book cloth and the paper stock and supervised the scanning and was on press to supervise the printing of the gorgeous tritone reproductions. So this new edition is just absolutely beautiful in terms of the reproduction, in terms of the object that you hold in your hands. And even if you have, as I do, the older version of The Americans, or an older version of The Americans, it is certainly worth getting this new version, because, more significantly, Frank did something he'd done in other reprints of the book. He changed the cropping of several of the images, adding information at the edges of the frame. What I love about this is that it calls attention to the importance of the process of editing in photography, the idea that what we leave out and what we put into the frame is of utmost importance. And even more, Frank's culling of his 20,000 negative shoot into just these 83 photographs points out how important the process of that edit is. Looking at the book again after all these years shows me the repeated themes of flags and jukeboxes and cars and crosses that echo through the book. And what appears at first as a haphazard assortment of images becomes more cohesive on every viewing. And it literally is one of those books you can pull off your bookshelf and continue to look at and continue to learn something. And the sequence and rhythm and the images in the book are just that good. Photography was never the same after the publication of The Americans. Every photographer who pressed a shutter release button was able to do new and different things after Frank showed the world that photography could be a lot more than a mere record. So Robert Frank's The Americans, especially this new, beautiful, sumptuously produced edition from Städel in Germany, just an amazing job of producing the book, and the idea that the pictures are cropped in slightly different ways, and especially if you're familiar with the work, you'll see some new things that you hadn't seen before. So I'm making The Americans the Photographer's Bookshelf number 5 recommendation. And obviously I'll have a link there on cameraposition.com blog for the book. I hope that you'll pick up a copy and see what you can learn about the process of editing and the process of sequencing and the way in which words can combine with pictures to change the way we feel about the imagery. So thank you for joining me on this episode of Camera Position. Those of you who've listened all the way to the end here, the first 3 people who send me an email with the subject heading T-shirt will receive a copy of the Camera Position, the official Camera Position T-shirt. Let me know what size you want, and I will send that out to you as a sort of a note of appreciation for listening to the podcast. And for each of those 3 people, I will offer a $100 discount on the enrollment for the workshop in Tuscany in the spring of 2009. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. Camera Position is a proud member of the Photocast Network, your photo resource in the potosphere. photocastnetwork.com